I am more than my physical body. Because I am more than physical matter, I can perceive that which is greater than the physical world. I deeply desire to expand, to experience, to know, to understand, to control, to use such greater energies and energy systems as may be beneficial and constructive to me and to those who follow me. I deeply desire the help and cooperation, the assistance, the understanding of those individuals whose wisdom, development, and experience are equal to or greater than my own. I ask their guidance and protection from any influence or any source that might provide me with less than my stated desires.
I do not know all the answers to the questions about reality. I do not claim to know the ultimate truth about life. I seek that which has been made hidden as a part of a family of explorers of consciousness. I am the void one.
Welcome to Lighting the Void.
Oh, broadcasting live from a shack on a hill in the Mossy Creek bottoms of Cane Creek, Arkansas. Happy 4th of July, everybody. This is Lighting the Void live. Unless you're doing what I'm doing, like unless you're out, you're working. I mean, we still got to work regardless. We'll shoot some firecrackers off, but it's the 4th of July. It's 11 after 10, I guess, on the East Coast. 4th of July 2024, and I'm alive. God damn, it feels good to be alive. I'm just saying, I thought I was poisoned, man, for a little bit. Like, I don't know if it was I think it was a virus. I'm hoping it was a virus, but I hope that unless, you know, you're working or whatever, that you're with your family right now. But either way, if you want to hang out with us 4th of July, that's cool too. But I understand if you don't. But man, I thought for sure I'm just saying, I thought for sure I was going to die. Like, it was awful. I was hunkered over in my bed, like in the the fetal position, I guess, and for 2 or 3 days. Sunday. So here's what happened. So if this happens to you, look out, right? All of a sudden, just massive fatigue. I got so tired I could barely function. I mean, I woke up out of a nap, and I think I fell asleep in the fucking bathroom. I don't know. I mean, I was real tired. And then I got a fever. Like a bad fever. And I thought, oh shit, like I'm getting sick. I'm just going to go lay down. And the next thing I know, man, it feels like someone was just stabbing me in my gut with a knife over and over and over again. And it stayed that way for a couple of days. And it was awful. I thought, you know, I've had the flu before. It didn't feel like that. And I thought, man, somebody poisoned me or something, right? That's what I thought. That's crazy. Like, that's the first thing that my brain thought was like, I got poisoned, you know. But anyways, I apologize about the background noise. It's extremely hot So I've got the ratty air conditioner blowing, but I've also got the firecrackers here just in case the neighbors get too loud. You might hear some massive explosions in the background. Man, blazing some biscotti for America. Hell yeah. Well, I'm not going to set these off in the shack, but I thought about it. You know, I definitely thought about it. So, what else? Other than that, I think we should just get right back into it. The reason why I'm doing this whole thing with the Kabbalah and the Tree of Life and stuff like that is, first and foremost, let me explain to you why I think it matters. Because all of the occult world revolves around this thing. Two, there are authorities in this field. I am not one of them. Let's make that very clear. There are authorities and magicians and occultists that know this stuff in and out, through and through. And I can name a few of them off the top of my head. Probably Lon Milo Duquette being probably my number one pick. David Griffin, Chick Cicero, Mark Stavish, who else? Liam Thomas Christopher. A ton of people that know the material that we're talking about. Again, always remember that we're taking this journey together, and all I'm trying to do is expound upon things from my point of view in a layman's terms, right? Because the Tree of Life is a beautiful thing. It's a philosophic, yeah, basically you're the outbreak monkey, yeah, right. Like, dude, no one was sick. I checked around like everywhere too. I was like, is anybody sick? Did anybody get the flu? I called up to the place where I get Indian food. I called up to the other place. I said, is anybody sick? Anybody? No, nobody's sick around here. So why am I going down for the count? I thought I was going to die. And in those times when you think you're going to die, you have a mental fortitude that starts to happen. Either that or I'm just a big wuss when you get sick, but you start thinking about death, man, and it's not fun. There's been so many moments in my life where I've said, oh, man, just God, just please get me through this. I'll drink a ton of water, whatever you want me to do, just get me through this, please, God. I don't know how many times I've had that prayer, but this was one of those moments, for sure. This was definitely one of those moments. So anyways, I'm feeling a lot better. I felt so happy today to not be sick. I was so grateful just to have my health. It's an amazing thing that we take for granted, that I did nothing but clean stuff all day, danced around. I had my own dance party, you know. It just felt good to not be sick, I guess. Anyways, back to the tree, right? So the tree is just like this philosophic system of grammar and a map of exploration that we use, were these spheres of massive egregoric energy that, composite, I guess, themselves in each sphere to represent all of these energies in one place. And like this Sephiroth, that Sephiroth, whatever. They have different patterns, right? We talked about the triangles. Things reside on different pillars and all this other stuff. The reason why it's important is because when you start to scry or practically work with your consciousness, because that's what we're doing, we're void walking, right? We need a system other than chaos, even though the astral realm is complete chaos, but we need some kind of system to explore consciousness and our psyche so that we can map things, right? So I know, like, our mind tends to think that we're not working together with the universe or God or whatever, but I believe that we are. So when we create something, it kind of creates with us, and it's like a mutual understanding. This is why symbols and all this other stuff work really well. Is it ultimate reality? No. Is it a form of anything other than occult science? No, it's not. But it's extremely effective, because as you start training your mind to this tree, it becomes easier to explore yourself, things about you, all this Jungian stuff that you need to work out. And, I personally believe, but this is just my belief, that there is a metaphysical realm where these energies are attached to, whether they were there since the beginning of time or they got co-created over time with God and humanity. Who knows, right? So as I said before, we could put different systems on this tree. All of them work on the tree: astrology, the tarot, the planets. What we're going to talk about today, all these different pantheons of gods and things like that. All the religious stories, everything works on this tree. It just does. What's up, Sudi? Yeah, I'm feeling better. Man, I've been pounding water. My son says that I should do this thing. It's called 75 hard or something like that, where you pound a gallon of water for 75 days. Is he making that up? Is he just wanting me to drink more water? Because I think I haven't heard of that, but I'm doing it. And by the way, my son's so old that I can't go play fireworks with him outside. He's in his 20s, so I need another child, right? I'm throwing that out to the universe. I'm ready. Who says that? I miss it, man. I do. He's grown. Like, I'm alone now. Hey, you want to hang out? You want to play video games? You want to watch sports? You want to talk? Nah, it's like that Cats in the Cradle song. He's got better stuff to do right now. But I'm hoping that when he gets in his late 20s or 30s, he'll come around. I love him to death, though. He's my baby boy. Time for another child. All right. So, let me put the glyph up here. If you're listening on the radio station, you can come over to YouTube. All I'm doing is just putting a glyph up of the tree on that's kind of like in front of the moon. And what we're reading from is one of the books that all of these people tell you to go read. Is The Mystical Qabalah by Dion Fortune. If you get time, I would love it if you go watch like my introduction to Kabbalah and those like introduction videos so you can understand this better. But there are other books that I think beginners should read. So a good one would be The Chicken Kabbalah by Lon Maladuquette. And I'll start linking to this stuff too. That book is kind of a funny book because he explains it like a rabbi is talking to a student and all this stuff, and it's kind of funny, but it explains it better. So anyways, I'm burning through time here. So we're on chapter 8, the gods upon the tree. Oh shit! Someone asked me why is the Kabbalah spelled with a Q, with a K? I even have seen it with a C. I've said this before. I'll say it again. I wouldn't pay too much attention to it, but most of the time, the Kabbalah with a K is usually referenced if you're picking up books about like kosher Kabbalah, Jewish stuff, things like that. With a Q, a lot of times it's Christian or it's Hermetic like this one. I'm just saying I wouldn't pay too much attention to how it's spelled. All that stuff doesn't really matter. It's just the concept of what we're trying to do here. So, chapter 7, the gods upon the tree. So all students of comparative religion and its poor relation, folklore, are agreed that primitive man, observing and beginning to analyze the natural phenomena surrounding him, attributed them to the agency of beings akin to himself in nature and type, but transcending him in power. In other words, since the beginning of time, we've been relating lots of things in nature to gods and powers above us. So as he could not see them, he not unnaturally called them invisible. And as he could not see his own mind during life or his friend's soul after death, he concluded that the beings that produced natural phenomena were the same nature as the invisible but active mind and soul. Now, all this sounds very crude as it is put by the anthropologists, but that is only because when translating savage ideas, they choose words that have crude associations. For instance, the standard translations of one of the chief scriptures of China refers to the venerable philosopher Lao Tzu as the old boy. And this sounds comical to European ears, yet it's not so far removed from the words of another scripture which has been fortunate enough to receive translation at the hands of those who reverenced it, except ye become as a little child. I'm not a sinologue, but I incline to the opinion that the translation eternal child would have been equally accurate and in better taste. There is a saying in the mysteries, quote, "See that ye blaspheme not the name by which another knoweth his God. For if ye do, this in Allah, ye will do it in Adonai." In other words, don't make fun of don't blaspheme, I guess, other people's God names. And after all, was primitive man so very far off the mark when he attributed the causation of natural phenomena to activities of the same nature as the thought processes of the human mind, but upon a higher arc? It's not that the point towards which both physics and metaphysics are gradually converging. You know, we say that a lot. I mean, we say that metaphysics and physics they're going to come together. Science and spirituality are going to come together. But I still think we're a long ways off. You know, after watching Joe Rogan and I guess Terrence Howard and Eric Weinstein talk, it would seem, if you just listen to Terrence Howard, right, it would seem that, oh yeah, you know, science and spirituality is actually starting to come together. But if you listen to, it was the most amazing episode. I highly recommend you listen to it. Joe Rogan, Terrence Howard, and Eric Weinstein, because they're still a long ways off, if you ask me. And who says that they're supposed to come together? You know what I mean? So supposing we were to recast the statement of the savage philosopher and say the essential nature of man is similar in type of that to his creator, would we be held to have said anything either blasphemous or ridiculous? No. I love how she states the obvious, right? So we may personalize natural forces in terms of human consciousness, or we may abstract human consciousness in terms of natural forces, but both are legitimate proceedings in occult metaphysics, and the process yields some very interesting clues and some very important practical applications. We must not, however, make the mistake of the ignorant and say A is B when we mean A is of the same nature as B. But equally, we may legitimately avail ourselves of the Hermetic axiom, as above, so below, because if A and B are of the same nature, the laws governing A can be predicted concerning B. What is true of the drop is true of the ocean, and consequently, if we know anything concerning the nature of A, we may conclude that, allowing for the difference in scale, it will apply to B. This is the method of analogy used in the inductive science of the ancients, and provided it is counterchecked by observation and experiment, God, I hope so, man, it can yield some very fruitful results and cut out many leagues of weary wandering in the dark. Yeah, so if as above is so below, if we observe things on a bigger scale, and we can see that the way those laws work, that they work this way, the same way in our small little world here, then we still have a guide. It gives us a guidepost to study and to explore consciousness, but we still should experiment with it. We still shouldn't, in my opinion, especially in philosophy and fringe stuff and occult science and things like that, we still shouldn't point our finger and say, well, this is exact, this is reality, and speak of these things as if they are objective truths most of the time. I'm not talking about morality here. I believe in objective morality. I'm just talking about, let's say, for instance, I'll give you an example. So we see that in the universe, how the sun and the moon work. The moon reflects its light upon the earth and all this other stuff. So how do we explore this like consciously? So we look into the occult world and we realize that we have this solar energy about us, which represents a lot of different things, including our ego. But we also have this lunar energy about us. With this, so we've got this masculine and feminine thing going again. We've got all these different things that our mind corresponds to these energies. But without exploring them consciously in our dream world, through divination, through scrying, through all forms of conscious exploration, out-of-body experiences, whatever. Without testing these theories, all they are just concepts to our mind, right? So we have to go out and observe these things in nature, so that are unconscious, that we can observe and experience the truth of these things. It's one thing to have someone read something to you or teach something to you or just talk about it, yap about it. But if you don't experience it, it's not going to sink in to the wisdom side of you taking in knowledge, right? Because there's wisdom and understanding. We humans are that way, though. Like, for instance, we don't drink enough water a lot of times until we get fucking sick, right? And then they're like, oh, I should drink water because water's a part of nature. It's observable in the natural world. And yeah, fun to talk about, but doing it is another thing, right? So the personification and deification of the natural forces was man's first crude and shrewd attempt to evolve a monistic theory of the universe and save himself from the destructive and crippling influence of an unresolved dualism. As age by age extended his knowledge and elaborated his intellectual processes, he read more and more significance into the first simple classifications. Nevertheless, he did not discard his original classifications because they were fundamentally sound and represented actualities. He simply elaborated and extended them, and finally, when he fell on evil times, overlaid them with superstition. We should not therefore regard the pagan pantheons as so many aberrations of the human mind, nor should we try to understand them from the viewpoint of the unrestricted and uninitiated. We should try to find out what they must have meant to the highly intelligent and cultured high priests of the cults in their heyday. Yeah, for sure, because even if you're not religious, let's say you're Christian or you're bashing paganism, there's only one God, there's not these many gods, and it doesn't make sense, whatever you're arguing about. You have to remember that the ancient gods back then were derived from life processes that people were experiencing back then, right? So, and we all have had our priest class. We have it today, which is like in the church, I guess, but they had it back then too. But back then, I think the priests were a little bit more educated, right? But it doesn't mean they were right about all these different gods. And most of the time when you look back through the ancient gods, there's all these gods that correspond with the planets. Most of the systems are gods that correspond with the planets, right? So compare, let's see, what is she saying? Compare Madam David Neal and W.B. Seabrook on the subject of heathen rites with the reports of the average missionary. Seabrook shows us the spiritual significance of voodoo, and David Neal shows us the metaphysical aspect of Tibetan magic. These things appear in one way to the sympathetic observer who wins the argument of the exponents of the systems and succeeds in being received into their holy of holies as a friend, and who goes to learn instead of merely to observe and ridicule, and in another way, to the beef-fed zealot who walks into the holy place in his dirty boots and gets stoned by the indignant worshipers. Thank God that doesn't happen here. That still happens in other countries, but it doesn't happen here. In judging these things, let us consider the form Christianity would present if approached in the same way. Unsympathetic observers would probably conclude that we worshipped a sheep, and the Holy Ghost would yield some spectacular interpretations. Let us credit other people with using metaphors if we do not expect to be taken literally ourselves. The outer form of the ancient pagan faiths is no cruder than Christianity in backward Latin countries, where Jesus Christ is represented in topper and tails, and the Virgin Mary in lace-edged pantaloons. The inner form of the ancient faith can compare favorably with the best of our modern metaphysicians, and after all, they produced Plato and Plotinus. The human mind does not change, and what is true of ourselves is probably true of the pagans. The Lamb of God, which taketh away the sins of the world, is only another version of the bull of Mithra, which does the same thing. The only difference being that the ancient initiate was literally washed in blood, and the modern ones take it metaphorically. Yeah, that's a whole other subject, right? You remember when I was talking about the Eucharist, the rite of the Eucharist, where it comes from? If you guys have listened to the show. Yeah, it actually, the ancients did what the ritual talks about. And in Christianity, they just, Jesus, or let's say Yeshua ben Joseph, or whoever initiated that Eucharist, the blood and the bread and all this stuff, this is my body or whatever, took the egregoric powers of the egregoric energy of rites that we've been doing since the beginning of time, and just said, look, hey, drink this wine, eat this bread, and use it to represent this, right? She's got some Latin here, Aturus tempus, Aturus mors. So if we approach those whom we elect to call pagans, both ancient and modern, in a reverent and sympathetic spirit, knowing that Allah and Brahma and Amun-Ra are but other names for that which we worship as God, we shall learn a very great deal that was forgotten in Europe when the Gnosis was stamped out and its literature destroyed. We shall find, however, that the pagan faiths present their teachings in a form that is not readily assimilable by the European mind, and that if we are to arrive at its significance, we must restate it in our own terms. We must correlate the metaphysical concept with the pagan symbol. Then we shall be able to apply to the former the vast mass of mystical experience which generations of contemplatives and experimental psychologists have organized about the latter. And when we speak of experimental psychologists, we must not make the mistake of thinking that they are an exclusively modern product, because the priests of the ancient mysteries, with their temple sleep and deliberately induced hypnagogic visions, were nothing more or nor less than experimental psychologists. Amen to that. Though their art has been lost like many other of the ancient arts and is only being laboriously recovered piecemeal in the more advanced circles of scientific thought. Yeah, we gotta we really gotta think about this stuff, right? Like when we read spiritual literature, a lot of the times they say, I was in the vision of the Spirit, or I saw this or that. Whether it's Ezekiel or whatever book we're reading. They also say in spiritual texts, point blank, whether I was in the body or out of the body, I don't know. Or I was in the spirit or whatever. So they could have just been exploring their consciousness. They could have had an out-of-body experience. They could have been in a hypnagogic state. Regardless, they do what magicians do. They recorded their visions. And that's a whole other show, but how this stuff became gospel is another thing altogether. So the method used by the modern initiate for interpreting the language spoken by the ancient myths is a very simple and effectual one. He finds it in the Kabbalistic tree of life, a link between the highly stylistic pagan systems and his own more rational methods. The Jew, Asiatic by blood and monotheistic by religion, has a foot in both worlds. Upon the tree of life, with its 10 holy Sephiroth, the modern occultist bases both a metaphysic and a magic. He uses a philosophical conception of the tree to interpret what it represents to his conscious mind, and he uses a magical and ceremonial application of its symbolism to link it up with his subconscious mind. This is like probably the most profound statement and the best way to put magic as a whole with the tree of life, right? Upon the tree of life, with its 10 holy Sephiroth, the modern occultist bases both a metaphysic and a magic. He uses a philosophical conception of the tree to interpret what it represents to his conscious mind, and he uses a magical and ceremonial application right? That means applied of its symbolism to link it up with his subconscious mind. So the tree is not only used as a system of symbols to correspond with these energies, but it's also used to apply ceremony as well. And all of this stuff works upon the subconscious mind. The initiate consequently makes the best of both worlds, ancient and modern. For the modern world is all surface consciousness and has forgotten and repressed the subconsciousness to its own great hurt. And the ancient world was mainly subconsciousness, consciousness having been but recently evolved. When the two are linked up and brought into polarized function, when the two become one, they yield superconsciousness, which is the goal of the initiate. Holding the foregoing conception in mind, let us now try to coordinate the ancient pantheons with the spheres upon the tree of life. There are 10 such spheres, the 10 holy Sephiroth, and between these we must distribute, according to type, the different gods and goddesses of whatever pantheon we wish to study. We are then in a position to interpret their significance in the light of what we already know concerning the principles represented by the tree, and to add to our knowledge of the tree all that is available concerning the significance of the ancient deities. I have a video called The 10 Sephiroth that it doesn't go over every single energy for each Sephiroth, but it's like a broad kind of view. You should check that out too. So this is obviously of great intellectual value, but there is another value which does not so readily appear to the average man who has had no experience of mystery workings. The performance of a ceremonial rite symbolically representing the working of the force personified as a god has a very marked and even drastic effect on the subconscious mind of any person who is at all susceptible to the psychic influences. Hello. Hope if you didn't get that, just rewind it if you're listening later. The ancients had brought these rites to a very high pitch of perfection, and when we moderns are trying to reconstruct the lost art of practical magic, we can go to them with great profit. The whole philosophy of European magic is based upon the tree, and no one can hope to understand it or use it intelligently who has not been trained in the Kabbalistic methods. It is this lack of training which makes popular occultism so very apt to degenerate into the crudest superstitions. For instance, your number in your name becomes a different thing when we understand the mathematical Qabalah. Fortunes and teacups are another matter when we understand the significance of the magical images and the method of their formulation and interpretation as a psychological device for penetrating the veil of the unconscious. Broadly speaking, then, we sort out the gods and goddesses of all the pagan pantheons into the 10 pigeonholes of the 10 holy Sephiroth, relying chiefly upon their astrological associations to guide us, because astrology is the one universal language for all people, see the same planets, and space is referred to Kether, the zodiac to Chokmah. So space would be Kether, the very top of the tree. Chokmah, the first Sephiroth, the top right, would be the zodiac, and the 7 planets to the next 7 Sephiroth, and Earth to Malkuth. So consequently, any god who has an analogy with Saturn will be referred to Bina in that sphere, as will any goddess who might be termed with the primordial mother, the superior Eve, will be there as well, as distinguished from the inferior Eve, which is the bride of the microprosopos, that goes to Malkuth, the earth. The supernal triangle, the top triangle of Kether, Chokmah, and Bina, always refers to the old gods, which every pantheon recognizes as the predecessors of those forms of Godhead worshipped by the current faith. Thus, Rhea and Kronos would be referred to Bina and Chokmah, and Jupiter to Chesed. All the corn goddesses, I can't say that. Can you say that? Goddesses? All the corn goddesses refer to Malkuth, and all the lunar goddesses to Yesod, the lunar sphere. The war gods and destructive gods, or divine devils, refer to Geburah, and the goddesses of love to Netzach. The initiator gods of wisdom are referred to Hod, and the sacrifice gods and redeemers to Tifereth. So, great in authority as Richard Payne Knight in his valuable book, The Symbolic Language of the Ancient Art and Mythology, speaks of the remarkable concurrence of the allegories, symbols, and titles of ancient mythology in favor of the mystic system of emanations. With this clue, we sort out the pantheons, thus enabling ourselves to compare like with like and make the one illuminate the other. And for the record, just because I'm reading something that brings up the word Aleister Crowley doesn't mean that I'm a Crowley follower. I hate that shit when people say that. Not that it matters, but what's up, Word Salad? What's up, Ava? Happy 4th. How you doing? PK. All right. It was one of the first things that in Liam Thomas Christopher's book too, that when he starts you out with a neophyte material, he has you make these blank trees, like a sheet of paper with just, you can make as many as you want with blank circles. And then you could fill out, say you take the Egyptian god systems and which gods go in which Sephirah. Same thing with the Greek gods. Same thing with, I guess you could do the Druid gods and the Norse gods. You could do them all, and they all will fit in that tree kind of perfectly, right? In the system he gives of his book of correspondences, Liber 777, Crowley assigns the gods to the paths as well as to the Sephiroth. This, in my opinion, is a mistake and leads to confusion. I think it does too. I think you should just stick to the spheres with this one. It is in the Sephiroth alone that represent natural forces. The paths are states of consciousness. The Sephiroth are objective, and the paths are subjective. It is for this reason that in the working glyph of the tree used by initiates, the Sephiroth are always represented in one color scale and the paths in another. Those who possess this glyph will know to what I refer. The paths themselves, in my opinion, should be regarded as under the direct presidency of the holy names governing their Sephirotic attributions only, and should not be confused with other pantheons. For although we may go to other systems for intellectual enlightenment, we are unwise to attempt to mix the methods of practical working and unfoldment of consciousness. For instance, the 17th path between Tifereth and Bina, which is that, if you look at the tree between Tifereth and Bina, is that light orange one that's going in a diagonal, top left. So that path, what is she saying? For instance, the 17th path between Tifereth and Bina is assigned by the Sefer Yitra to the element of air. We are far wiser to work it with the right of the element of air and the holy names assigned thereto, and to approach it through the appropriate Tattva cards, rather than confuse the issue with the associations of the assorted collections of deities like Castor and Pollux, Janus or Apollo, Murti, and other incompatibilities that were assigned to it by Aleister Crowley, whose correspondences present an inextricable tangle of associations. And I would say the same thing. You could disagree, but this is my point. Like, if you're going to do ceremony or you're going to work with energies of any kind or whatever and use the tree, I would stick, especially if you're going to use like gods or whatever, I would stick to just putting the gods in the Sephiroth. Don't put them in the paths, because the paths are a blending of two. It doesn't make sense to put them in the paths. The paths are a blending of two Sephirotic energies. It's like a journey between those two Sephiroth. So the Sephiroth, the circles, should be interpreted macrocosmically and the paths microcosmically. Thus we shall find the clue to the tree in both man and nature. Brings up a lot of questions though, doesn't it? All right, so next part is how do we practically work upon the tree? So do we just study this thing, or how do we practically use it? So practical work upon the tree. So if among the readers who have followed these studies in the Kabbalah thus far, there are any of the more advanced students of Western occultism, They will no doubt have found much more that is familiar than is new or original. In working upon this storehouse of ancient knowledge, we are in the position of excavators working on the site of a buried temple. We are digging up fragments rather than studying a coherent system, for the system, though coherent enough as it is in its heyday, was broken and scattered and defaced by the persecutions of 20 centuries of unenlightened bigotry and spiritual jealousy. Yeah, so if we've lost any texts that correlate to any of the Gnostic texts or any of the books and teachings that we can't find that teach about these energies and the tree and stuff, we have religious bigots to thank because they love to burn books. That's a fact. Burn people, too. They love to do that. More work has been done upon the scattered fragments than is generally realized, however. Madame Blavatsky gathered together a great mass of data and exposed it to the gaze of a public which understood it little better than the child gazing at the cases in a museum and marveling at the queer things they contain. The scholarly work of J.R.S. Mead has given us much information concerning the gnosis, or the esoteric tradition of the Western world during the earlier centuries of our epoch. Mrs. Atwood's monumental book has revealed the significance of the alchemical symbolism to us. None of these, however, have expounded the Western tradition as initiates of that tradition, but have approached it from outside and either pieced together its fragments or, as in the case of Blavatsky, interpreted it by analogy in the light of the more familiar system of another tradition. Those who approach the study of the subject from the inside, that is to say, with the initiatory keys, and employed it as a practical system for the exaltation of consciousness, have, for the most part, maintained a secrecy which, though it might have been not only justifiable and even essential in those days when the Holy Inquisition rewarded such researchers with the stake, it is difficult to assign to any more credible motive in our liberal age than a desire to create and maintain prestige. In other words, there's no point in keeping this stuff secret. I mean, we're not burning people at the stake anymore, at least for the most part. A very effectual corner in occult practice, if not in occult knowledge, has been established and maintained among English-speaking peoples for the last quarter of a century. A corner that effectually defeated the spiritual impulse which should have given rise to a renaissance of the mysteries during the last quarter of the last century. Consequently, the earth being ripe for the sowing and the wheat not being broadcast therein, the four winds brought strange seeds to the waiting ground, and a tropical growth sprang up that, having no roots in racial tradition, withered away or developed strange forms. Boy, she has a way with analogies that makes you think that she's talking about something totally different most of the time. The buried temple of our native tradition has in actuality been excavated, in part at any rate, but the rescued fragments have not been made available for students according to the honorable traditions of European scholarship, but have been gathered together into private collections, the keys whereof have rested in the pockets of individuals who have opened and closed the doors in an entirely arbitrary fashion. I have no doubt these pages will cause heart burnings. Hold on a second, so let me just clear this up. When she wrote this book back then, a lot of the stuff that she's going to be revealing about the Sephiron stuff was kept secret in these orders or whatever. Nowadays, if we want to learn it, all we got to do is just freaking go to some website and pick up the book or something. So she talks about that a lot. It's kind of irrelevant to us, but to her back then it was. I have no doubt these pages will cause heart burnings in certain quarters whose private collections they depreciate in value. But I have no doubt also that the innumerable students who essayed the Western path in vain may find in these pages the keys to what was incomprehensible to them in the method, or perhaps, to be more accurate, the complete lack of method in which they were trained. Speaking for myself, it took me 10 years of work in the dark before I found the keys, and I only found these in the end because I was sufficiently psychic to pick up the inner plane contacts. I find it difficult to believe that any useful purpose is served by deliberately darkening counsel or by withholding from the student keys and explanations that are essential to his work. If the student is unworthy to be trained, do not let us train him. If he is to be trained at all, let us train him properly. Yeah, don't be withholding information, some bitches. In the following pages, I have done my best to elucidate the principles governing the use of magical symbolism. The practical use of the ceremonial method is best attempted under the guidance of one who is already experienced in its use. To work alone or with equally inexperienced comrades is to run unnecessary risks, but there is no reason why anyone should not experiment with the meditative methods. In order to use the magical symbols effectually, one has to make the contact of each individual symbol. It is of little use to make a list of symbols and then proceed to the construction of a ritual. In magic, as in violin playing, one has to make one's notes. One does not find them ready-made as on the piano. The student of the violin has to learn to make each individual note before he can play an air. So it is with any occult operation. We must know how to construct and contact the magical images before we can work with them. The sets of symbols associated with each of the 32 paths are used by the initiate to build up the magical images. It is necessary that he should know these symbols not only in theory, but also in practice. That is to say, he must not only have them thoroughly well rooted in his memory, but must also have performed meditations upon them individually until he has penetrated their significance and experienced the force that they represent. That's a pretty profound statement. So how many people do you think that call themselves magicians or practicing magicians or whatever have literally meditated thoroughly upon each symbol, even the elemental symbols, and meditated and studied the symbol enough to where they actually felt its presence or its force? Because first, your unconscious has to kind of be open to it. And this is where people get scared about the occult, because there's this idea that once you meditate upon these symbols, you're opening portals to different things, and almost like the symbol has a way of just turning you into a completely different person and possessing you and all this other stuff. And it's bullshit, right? The only way that it could do that is if your fear of it let that happen. Just like if you read or listened to Psychic Self-Defense, it's only in the fear of things where they have those kinds of powers. I mean, you wouldn't look at the cross. That would be like the same thing as saying, well, I'm going to meditate upon the Christian cross, and you start meditating upon the Christian cross, understanding its meaning, doing a path working where you're taken through the crucifixion of Jesus Christ or whatever, and all of a sudden you're possessed and now you're Jesus, and stigmata happens and all this other shit, right? But you still could feel the emotions and of that time, or also understand the different meanings of the cross. Begin to, because you've meditated upon it, your consciousness, it's just psychology, once you go out into the world, will begin to focus on things in nature and experiences in life that represent that symbol. Same thing as like when you buy a damn car that you think is special, you start riding around in it, and now you see the damn car everywhere, right? Well, I thought I was special. I thought I had that car. No, it's just coming to, it used to be, and remember what she called fringe consciousness. It used to exist in your fringe consciousness. In other words, you weren't focused on it. You didn't, it was there. You just didn't see it. That's just a part of what she's saying. There's other ways to like experience the meanings of symbols when you meditate upon them. Anyways, I'm digressing again. So the sets of symbols associated with the 32 paths are used by the initiate to build up magical images. It's necessary that he should know the symbols not only in theory but also in practice. He must not only have them thoroughly rooted in his memory, but also have performed meditations upon them individually until he has penetrated their significance and experienced their force. To know the vast range of symbols associated with each path is, of course, the work of a lifetime. But the student must learn the key symbols of each path as the essential preliminary to his studies. He is then able to recognize all other symbol forms as they come in his way and assign them to their proper classification. His knowledge will thus develop under two aspects. Firstly, the knowledge of the symbolism and its infinite ramifications, and secondly, the philosophy of the interpretation of that symbolism. Once he has mastered a working knowledge of the concepts of esoteric cosmogony and has the general scheme of symbolism assigned to each sephirah well fixed in his memory, the student is equipped with a card index system and can commence filing, collecting the material for his files from every imaginable source in archaeology, folklore, mystical religion, travelers' tales, and speculations of ancient and modern philosophy and ultra-modern science. Yeah, so you remember, like, when we talked about this all the time on the show, how we like to categorize things as humans. We we want to understand something till it makes sense, right? That's just our nature. If something is unknown or chaotic, for some reason our mind needs to understand it or put it in a category. That's what the tree really does. It does that for us in a sense. The uninitiated inquirer may wonder how the enormous mass of data is kept sorted in the memory. To begin with, the serious student who uses the tree as his meditation method works at it regularly every day. Moreover, it will be found by experience that the assignation of symbols to each sephirah has a peculiar logical basis, hidden somewhere deep in the subconscious mind, and the symbol sequences are not nearly so difficult to remember as might be supposed, especially if they have been used for meditation. Some of the symbols refer to the concepts of esoteric philosophy, some to the methods of projecting consciousness in a vision, and some to the composing of ceremonial magic. The student must remember, however, that the symbols will never yield their significance to the conscious meditation alone. However correctly and completely they are known, they must be used as the initiates intended them to be used, to evoke images from the subconscious mind into the conscious content. Yeah. We've got to do the radio station thing, but here's the cool part. I am glad that in this book, as confusing as it may be to some, that in the beginning of the book, she just goes over a lot of broad stuff before she starts getting into like the energies of each sephirah. I think it's not a bad idea. Could she have done it better in a better way? Yeah, sure, but I mean, I'm not mad at her. Damn, I'm trying to find the transition here because I have to go to the radio station break. Speaking of which, if you can, please support the station. Like, we barely, and thank you, Michael, by the way, we barely made it for the radio station. I know Jess is out this week. She's not feeling good either, she said, but there are other people that are on the station that depend on it to run, and they've been on there for a while. And I know some of you guys that love the Fringe FM. It helps keep our website up. It helps keeps the store running. It helps keep us. It keeps us independent from having to totally like rely on broadcasting on things like YouTube and stuff like that. And the Fringe FM it's been like a traditional thing. It's been around for a while. So if you can, just go to fringe.fm and show us your support. We'll be right back. Don't go anywhere.
insert 25 cents for another hour of this program.
Hey, this is country music singer and void walker Jason Benoit, and when I need my fix on the world of magic and the capabilities of the human consciousness, I listen to Joe Roop right here on Lighting the Void Radio.
My name is Jake. I'm from Billings, Montana, and I am a void walker.
Hey, Joe Roop. Thanks for lighting the void. This is Janine in the bluegrass of Kentucky, and I am a void walker.
What's up, guys? This is Damien from San Marcos, Texas, and I'm a void walker. I listen to the show to keep myself aligned with the world.
Hi, this is Laura, aka Laura Lavender. I'm from Las Vegas, and I listen to Lighting the Void because it helps me understand some of the strangest experiences I've had. So thanks for all that you do and for always being there for us, Joe.
This is Malorcas 45, fan of the Fridge FM, challenging everyone to open their mind's eye. Listen to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop to gain precision for your third eye vision.
When I step into the light, my arms are open wide.
From Washington. Laid off and trying to keep our little kids from realizing that mommy and daddy haven't eaten in a while.
Roger from California. I'm grateful we could afford our son's surgery. I'm nervous that now we can't really afford food.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Donna from Louisiana. The storm just hit, and we went from donating to the food bank to needing it.
Keisha from South Carolina. I've been skipping meals so my 2 kids can eat, but filling up on water doesn't really work.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Is this tree good for climbing? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Safe gun storage saves lives. Learn how to make your home safer at endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Bumper stickers are a fun side hustle with low-cost investment that has built-in advertising to attract local customers in parking lots, rallies, gatherings, conventions, venues, and more. You could potentially sell these bumper stickers on consignment to local businesses, tattoo parlors, head shops, or any other independently owned store that might gear toward the fringe. Bumper stickers are great gift-giving ideas for friends and family. Also, a way to wake up your fellow travelers on the path without having to waste energy in tiresome debates. No car? No problem. Bumper stickers will stick to just about anything with a semi-smooth surface. Go to www.justbsme.com and get your bumper stickers today.
Hi, this is Kronox from Belgium, and you're listening to Lighting the Void with Joe Roop.
Do you want to know the truth? Are UFOs real? Are aliens visiting Earth? Are governments around the world hiding the biggest secret in history? We're UFO Seekers, official partner of The Fringe FM, and we're on a hunt for the truth. Join us as we investigate locations like Area 51 by subscribing on YouTube at youtube.com/UFO Seekers.
Have you ever wondered, what do the stars say for me? Or, will the next month or the next year be more favorable? How about, are our two signs compatible? Each month, at the new moon, you can ask these questions live with me, your astrologer psychic, Mary DeCina, along with host of Lighting the Void, Joe Roop. Join us at the new moon for Cosmic Conditions. We look forward to working with your energy.
Every new moon at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, right here on Fringe FM.
So, you love talk radio? Then you'll love TalkStreamLive.com. TalkStream Live is always on, 24/7 with the best streaming talk shows. Find your favorite talkers and discover some new ones. It's free, readily available online or on mobile with any smartphone or tablet. Finding your favorite talk shows all in one place has gotten a whole lot easier. Just go to TalkStreamLive.com. Be sure to download the free apps from Google Play or the iTunes App Store.
Broadcasting from Forest Tower Studios, all the way from the Deep South. Now, here is your host, Joe Root. You're listening to Lighting the Void Radio.
To Lighting the Void Radio here live on the Fringe FM. For those that are listening on the radio station, God love you. You've been there for a while. You can listen to the radio station 24/7. We have music and talk every single week. You can listen via the Fringe FM. We should be working on getting a new app soon. We used to have a pretty good app. I'd like to get that one back, but it might not happen. But anyways, you can listen on fringe.fm by hitting the play button. You could also listen on TalkStream Live at TalkStreamLive.com or download the TalkStream Live app and just find the Fringe FM and listen there. The Paranormal Radio app, TuneIn, and the Live 365 app. We're under all those as well. So we're going to pick up where we left off on the Mystical Qabalah. And it's going to get more interesting. That's the one kind of cool thing about this book is it takes you on a journey, I guess you could say, as the further you get into the book, the more you begin to understand the tree. It does start out very complex, though. Make sure you support the Fringe FM, and happy 4th of July. I hope that you shot some fireworks, barbecued something, drank a beer, spent some time with your loved ones. I've already blasted off some firecrackers. I think my neighbors are done, but it is kind of cool. I love the 4th of July, actually. We used to go to the river and watch the fireworks all the time. And then when I was living in Florida, man, that was probably one of the coolest 4th of July experiences I've ever experienced. It was in Daytona Beach. It's just all the way up and down the beach. There's nothing but fireworks going off. It was really cool. From the lighthouse where everybody surfs all the way to like downtown Daytona Beach. I miss it, man. But this isn't a show where I'm just going to cry about how much I miss Daytona Beach. No, we'll finish this book. If you want to call in too, you can, of course, anytime. 501-777-5631 is the call-in number. All right. And again, I apologize about the background rattle, but I'm not turning my AC off. It's too damn hot right now. A vision evoked by the use of the tree is, in fact, get ready for this, because this is going to blow your freaking mind for those conspiracy theorists out there. You ready? A vision evoked by the use of the tree is, in fact, an artificially produced waking dream, deliberately motived and consciously related to some chosen subject whereby not only the subconscious content, but also the superconsciousness perceptions are evoked and rendered intelligible to consciousness. So, no reason to get all up in arms about it, right? We understand it psychologically. In a spontaneous dream, the symbols are drawn at random from experience. In the Kabbalistic vision, however, the picture is evoked from a limited set of symbols to which consciousness is rigidly restricted by a highly trained habit of concentration. It is in this peculiar power. I'm hoping you guys understand that, right? Yeah. I'm just going to hope that you do. It is in this peculiar power to turn the mind loose within determined limits, which constitutes the technique of occult meditation, and it is only to be acquired by constant practice over a considerable period. It is this which constitutes the difference between the trained and the untrained occultist. The untrained person may be able to detach consciousness from the control of the directing personality and thus allow the images to rise, but he has no power to restrict and select what shall appear, and consequently anything may appear, including a varying proportion of subconscious content. The trained occultist, however, accustomed to use this method in his meditations, is able to swing instantly clear of the normal subconscious content unless it is disturbed by emotions, in which case he is liable to be entangled in its meshes. But even in this case, his method is his protection, for he is immediately able to recognize confused symbolism in the images because he has a definite standard of comparison with which to compare them. In studying the tree, the student should always think of each sephirah under the threefold aspect we have already mentioned of philosophy, psychism, and magic. To this end, he should always think of it firstly as representing a certain factor in the evolution of the cosmos and the immemorial past of cosmic time, whether it remains in manifestation, has passed away, or has not yet arrived at the level of dense matter. With this aspect of the tree are also taken the curious cryptic texts of the Sefer Yetzirah, one to each path. You should read that. Like, if you're really into the Kabbalah, I think you should read the Sefer Yetzirah. These most baffling utterances have a curious way of yielding sudden flashes of illumination to meditation and are by no means to be rejected as rubbish, incomprehensible though they may appear at first. Another source of illumination is to be found in the additional titles of the Sephiroth, each of which has anything from 1 to 2 or 3 dozen. These are graphic, descriptive names applied to the various Sephiroth by the ancient rabbis and found scattered through the Kabbalistic literature, and they tell us a great many things. For instance, the titles Concealed of the Concealed and Primordial Point. So if you're reading a text and you see that phrase, the concealed of the concealed, or the primordial point, those are applied to Kether. They convey a good deal to those who know where to look for it. We can also, once we are acquainted with the symbolism, assign to the various Sephiroth their equivalent gods and other systems. And when we look up the symbols and the functions, cosmic concepts, and methods of worship assigned to these deities, we get a fresh flood of illumination. By the use of a good mythological dictionary or an encyclopedia, Fraser's Golden Bough, and Madame Blavatsky's Secret Doctrine and Isis Unveiled, we can, by the mere application of diligence, read a great many riddles that at first appear insoluble, and exercise is a fascinating one. So basically, like, what she's saying there is, once you understand the tree, and then you go back and read these books, especially like the Old Testament or that kind of stuff, or Blavatsky's books, or any of these books, it'll start to make sense, because you'll see, oh, well, that would be this part of the tree, or they're talking about this. You can relate it to everything. So when used thus, the tree is God, I hate that word, peculiarly valuable, because its diagrammatic form causes things to be seen in relation to each other, thus causing them to throw light upon each other. In order to manipulate the psychic aspect of the tree and its past, the occultist uses images, because it is by means of images and the names that evoke them that the vision is formulated. He associates with each sephirah a primary symbol, which is called its magical image. Secondly, he associates with it in his mind a geometrical form, which, in various ways, embodies its characteristics. And when he composes symbols, he uses that form as the basis. For instance, Geburah, Mars, the fifth sephirah, has assigned to it a pentagon or a 5-sided figure. Any symbol of Gabura, whether it's a talisman, an altar to Mars, or a mental picture of a symbol, would be in the form of a pentagon colored in one of the colors of the Mars color scale. The most important forms upon the tree, however, are those associated with the 4 names of power associated to each Sephirah. With these are the associated 4 colors in which they are conceived to manifest in a symbolic form in each of the 4 worlds of the Kabbalists. I don't have a picture to show you this, but sometimes you'll see a picture of the tree of life and it'll have like, when you look at a Sephirah, it'll have like colored circles within circles. And you'll wonder, well, why does that Sephirah have all these different colors? Well, that's that Sephirah in each world. And the one color will represent that Sephirah in one world, and so on and so on. So the highest of these is the God name, which manifests in Absolute, the plane of spirit, and is the supreme name of power of that Sephirotic sphere and dominates all its aspects, whether cosmic, evolutionary, or subjective. It represents the idea underlying the development of manifestation in that sphere, the idea that runs through all subsequent evolution and expresses itself in all ensuing effects and manifestations. So if, let's say, for instance, someone wanted to invoke a vision or an understanding or say a prayer to that energy or whatever, if you use the name of God that governs it, that God name, which exists in the Absolute world, that God name governs all of the energies inside that sphere, right? The second name of power is that of the archangel of that sphere, and it represents the organized consciousness of the being through the activities of which the evolution of that phase was inaugurated and directed. So the archangel governs the energies and also the emanation or whatever that energy is supposed to do during, I guess, the emanation or manifestation, right? Although these beings are represented pictorially as of human form, though etherealized, it must not be thought that life and consciousness as we know them in any way correspond to their nature. They are more akin in essence to natural forces. Yet if we consider them simply as unintelligent energy, we shall have no adequate concept of their nature, because they are essentially individualized, intelligent, and purposive. Both these ideas must enter into our concept, modifying each other, till finally we shall arrive at a realization that differs very widely from anything to which Western thought is accustomed. Yeah, so I've heard people when they talk about angels, they're like, well, I don't know where I heard this, but this angel is like the angel of punishment, and it does bad things. You could take Samael for example, right? Samael is meant to like punish sometimes, right? So these angels have certain, and let's just look at these as egregoric energies, not ultimate reality or even the fact that angels are real. But in context, angels just do their job. They're nor good or bad per se. They exist in a place that comes from the Creator, which created good and bad. And if you want to look at that from a Christian context, and you don't believe me because people still have this like dichotomy in their head of God is good and the devil is bad. Well, yeah, but if you read the book of Isaiah, he flat out tells you, I created good and evil. I created light and dark, good and evil, everything. So wouldn't you think that the angels, if you were to take that as truth, doing their job underneath God, kind of do the same thing? This is why when you look at certain grimoires and stuff, you have all these demons, and then you go up to demonic thing, and then you have the kings, and you keep going up, and if you just keep going up the tree of all these entities and beings and stuff, there's an archangel. I got a bottle rocket in my hand. There's an archangel at the top. That angel governs all those entities underneath it. Some are good and some are bad. I don't know why we have a problem with polarity as humans. Like, it's either this or that. I just can't understand it if it's not. But it can be all things, right? So the third name of power denominates not one being, but a whole class of beings, the choirs of angels. So you've got God name, angel, choirs of angels. The choirs of angels, as they are called by the rabbis, and these again represent intelligent natural forces. The fourth denominates what we have called the mundane chakra. That is to say, the celestial object which is looked upon as the product of the particular phase of evolution which took place under the presidency of that Sephirah and which represents it. So 4 big powers in each circle, right? So you got God name, angel, choir of angels, and the thing that denominates the chakra, the mundane chakra. So the third aspect under which we consider the Sephirah is the magical aspect and is essentially practical. To arrive at this, we think of what may be experienced under the presidency of these different aspects of deity manifestation and what powers may be wielded by the magician when he has mastered their lessons. Each Sephirah has assigned to it a virtue, which represents its ideal aspect, the gift, which it brings to evolution, and a vice, which is the result of the overplus of its qualities. So just like everything, a Sephirah has good and bad energies inside of it. And if you want to keep going towards the bad, that's the Qliphoth, right? That's the negative tree. For instance, Geburah, Mars, has for its virtues energy and courage, and for its vices, cruelty and destructiveness. The student of astrology will at once recognize that the virtues and vices attributed to the various Sephirah are derived from the characteristics of the planets associated with them, and will find that in this correspondence is a whole new line of approach to astrology has opened up to them. The spiritual experience, I prefer to call it, or occult power as Crowley calls it, is a profound realization or vision of some aspect of cosmic science. This constitutes the essence of the initiation of the grade assigned to each Sephirah, for in the greater mysteries of the West, the grades are associated with the Sephirah. The medieval Kabbalists also assigned a part of the body to each Sephirah, but this must not be taken too literally. The real key is to be found in the realization that the different Sephirah represent factors in consciousness. So if we take Geburah again as the strong right arm, we must realize that it really means the dynamic will, the executive capacity, the destruction of the affected unbalanced. I could see why she's using Geburah as an example, because it's an easy one to explain a lot of things. Each Sephirah and path has assigned to it its symbolic animals. So think about magical correspondences now, right? Where do these energies originate, and how do they categorize them? Okay, so each Sephirah and path has assigned to its symbolic animals, plants, and precious stones. It is necessary that the student should know these for 2 reasons. First, they give some very important keys to the relation of the gods of the different pantheons to the Sephirah. And secondly, they form part of the symbolism of the astral paths and serve as landmarks when traveling in the spirit vision. For instance, if one saw a horse or a jackal, so let's say you're scrying or whatever, and you saw a horse, Mars, or a jackal, the moon, in the sphere of Netzach, Venus, one would know that there was confusion of plane and that the vision was not reliable, because you got all these spheres mixed in one vision. It doesn't make sense. In her sphere, one would expect to see doves and a spotted beast such as a lynx or a leopard. So what she's saying is if let's say you used a Tattva card, a tarot card, or whatever, and you wanted to go into a vision of Venus or Netzach, right? And you started seeing things like horses and jackals and stuff, like in your visions, like, what the hell is that there for? The vision's not reliable because those energies don't exist there. But if you saw things like doves, a spotted beast, and a lynx or a leopard, you'd know that you're in the right place. It may be thought that the association of the symbol beast with the gods and goddesses in the old myths is entirely arbitrary, and the fruit of this is poetic imagination, which, like the wind, bloweth where it listeth. Now, see, I don't know why she says that. I don't know why the hell she don't just say, it may not be taken very seriously, especially the old gods and goddesses. To this, the occultist answers that the poetic imagination is not an arbitrary thing, and refers the skeptic to the words of Dr. Carl Jung of Zurich, the famous psychiatrist, and to the essays of the Irish poet A.E., in particular, The Song and Its Fountains, wherein he analyzes the nature of his own sources of inspiration from the intrinsic nature of his poetry and from many passing references in his work. I think we may be entitled to claim that A.E., as one of the bands of students who have been nurtured on the Mystical Qabalah, but at any rate, what he has to say is sound Kabbalistic doctrine and extremely illuminating to our present argument. Dr. Jung has a great deal to say concerning the myth-making faculty of the human mind, and the occultist knows it to be true. He knows also, however, that its implications are much farther reaching than psychology has yet suspected. The mind of poet or mystic, dwelling upon the great natural forces and factors of the manifested universe, has, by the creative use of imagination, penetrated far more deeply into their secret causes and springs of being than has the scientist. It is not for nothing that the racial imagination, working thus, has come to associate certain animals with certain gods. A brief examination of the examples cited services to show the basis of the association. The doves of Venus show her gentler aspect, and the cat beast her sinister beauty. Damn, that's some confusing shit, Dion Fortune. So what she's saying in a nutshell is read Carl Jung, study active imagination, and realize that when Carl Jung was talking about experiencing the stuff in his visions, and realizing that a lot of this was, when it comes to reality, deeper and more real than what we think reality is. You have to actually go through this stuff and experience it to understand the concept of what I just said. Right? Like, you can't go out into the world and explain this stuff to people as like if it's logic or scientific fact. But if you have such a profound experience in consciousness when you're working with this stuff, and you realize all kinds of different things about reality, which I've had a few of those, not many, but a few working with the tree, that there is some kind of deeper metaphysical truth to these energies, and it's worth exploring. And that's good enough for me as a void walker to explore it. It's fascinating, actually. The association of plants with the different paths rests upon a twofold basis. Firstly, there are plants traditionally associated with the legends of the gods, as is corn with Ceres and the vine with Dionysus. But these we find associated with the Sephiroth, with which the functions of these gods are correlated, with Malkuth and the vine with Tifereth. I think I can't read this typo. Something, the chanced or something center, wherewith all are associated all the sacrifice gods in Tifereth, are associated all the sacrifice gods and the givers of illumination. Another thing that I like to do is use the geometry of plants. So, just as an experiment, if you come across any 5-petaled flower, I'm not saying all of the energy is going to come from Gabura, but obviously some of it does, right? Anything that has 7 petals on it or 7 leaves or whatever, that's going to come from that side. Just like anything with 6 comes from, you don't have to categorize it this way, but I do, comes from Tifereth. Matter of fact, I'm going to pull. I might be able to do this real quick. Not that I go around looking at plants all day, but it's a good way to like experiment with it, right? So if you looked at something, but there are things that have like so many petals you can't count them. But let's take like or they wouldn't really correspond with any of the sephira, but let's take like the sunflower. Now, if you're working with the sephira or the tree of life and you look at this beautiful sunflower, where do you think that comes? Where do you think that energy would correspond to? It would correspond to Tiferet, right? Which corresponds to the solar energy, and it looks like a big radiating sun anyways. Plants are associated with the sephira in another way. The old doctrine of signatures assigned various plants to the presidency of various planets in a somewhat erratic fashion. In some cases, there was a genuine association. In others, it was arbitrary and superstitious. Old Culpeper and other ancient herbalists have a great deal to say on the subject, and some very interesting researches are being done in the anthroposophical experimental farms. In a similar way, certain drugs are associated with the different sephira. And here again, we need to distinguish the superstitious from the mystical. The arbitrary attribution of drugs cannot always be justified by actual experiment, but we rarely safely say that whole classes of drugs could be regarded as under the presidency of certain sephira because they partake of the nature of certain modes of activity which are classified under these sephira. For instance, all aphrodisiacs could justly be assigned to Netzach, Venus, and all abortifacients to Yesod in her Hecate aspect, analgesics to Chesed or mercy, and irritants and caustics to Geburah. So if you're taking any aphrodisiac, like horny goat weed or whatever, all that shit they have in the gas stations, right? If you need that stuff, you could say that corresponds with Venus because it's an aphrodisiac. And all anything that corresponds to what is this word? Abortifacients? Is it what I think it is? Because I've never seen that word. It was like taking pills to make sure you don't get pregnant. Is that what that is? So you would take those. Let me make sure I got this word right. If you guys know, let me know. Yeah, it causes miscarriages or it prevents pregnancy. So if you're taking those, that would correspond to the moon, Yesod, right? So whatever natural substances they believe to do that, because Yesod, the lunar sphere, is where the generative or like the biological generative, I guess, sexual forces work to generate life, babies, things like that. The menstrual cycle. And her Hecate aspect. And analgesics, which are painkillers, to Chesed, right? Because Chesed is where Jupiter is, and that's mercy. And irritants and caustics to Geburah. Who the hell would take an irritant? I get why it would correspond with severity in Geburah, the red sphere, but like, who the hell would take it? I mean, that's unless you're a sadist or you're just some bitch that just wants to irritate other people. That's crazy. Anyways, ADD's kicking in. This opens up a very interesting aspect of the study of materia medica, the psychic and psychological aspect of drug activity. It was this aspect which was especially studied by the initiate physicians such as Paracelsus, and it was the ignorant and superstitious abuse of this aspect by uninitiated physicians that led to the extraordinary aberrations of folk medicine. The occultist knows that there is a psychological aspect to every physiological action and function. He also knows that it is possible powerfully to reinforce the action of all drugs by the appropriate mental action, and that certain chemically inert substances lend themselves effectually to the transmission and storing of mental activities, just as other substances are effectual conductors or insulators of electricity. Well, that's some deep alchemical stuff. We can get into that later. The consideration brings us to the question of the association of certain precious stones and metals with a different sephira, an association determined by both astrological and alchemical considerations. As is well known to psychics, crystalline substances, metals, and certain liquids are the best media for conveying or storing subtle forces. Color plays an important part in the visions induced by meditation on the various sephiroth, and is found by experience that a crystal of the appropriate color is the best material out of which to make a talisman. A blood-red ruby for the fiery Martian forces of Gabora, an emerald for the green ray nature forces of Netzach. For example, perfumes, especially incense, are also associated with a different sephira. As has already been noted, certain spiritual experiences and certain modes of consciousness are assigned to each sphere on the tree, and it is well known that nothing induces states of mind or stimulates psychic consciousness more effectually than odors. Scents are surer than sights or sounds to make your heartstrings crack. That says the most objective of poets, and the experience of practical occultists proves this to be true. And there are certain aromatic substances associated by tradition with the different gods and goddesses, and these are most effectually potent to stimulate the mood, which is in harmony with the function of that deity. Yeah, to this day, like if I'm meditating upon certain things, I have certain incenses that correspond with them, Magical weapons are also included in the long list of symbols and substances associated with each path. A magical weapon is an instrument of some sort which is used in the evocation of a particular force, or is the vehicle of its manifestation, such as the rod of the magician or the bowl of water or crystal sphere of the seer. The assignation of the magical weapons to the paths tell us a good deal about the nature of the paths, because we can deduce therefrom the kind of power that operates in the particular sphere in question. As already noted, the various divinatory systems have their relations with the tree and find their subtlest clues therein. The associations of astrology are readily traced through the symbolism of the planets and elements and their triplicities, houses, and rulership. Geomancy links with the tree via astrology and the tarot, the most satisfactory of all the systems of divination, rises from and finds its explanation in the tree and nowhere else. Damn. I wonder if all the tarot readers know that. What do you think Dion Fortune would say if she turned on YouTube today and watched all the tarot readers? Do you think she'd flip out? Probably. That may seem a dogmatic statement to the scholarly historian searching for traces of the origin of those mysterious cards, and may we add, most unamenably failing to find it. But when it is realized that the initiate works the tarot and the tree together, and that they dovetail into each other at a very imaginable angle, it will be seen that such an array of correspondences could be neither arbitrary nor fortuitous. Well, let's, damn it, I hate to disagree with Dion Fortune in a sense, but let's look at the tarot. Just hold up a minute. So, the tarot cards that led up to all of the tarot cards, let's just say all of the tarot cards before the 1850s or the 1800s, and there were tarot cards, didn't have a damn thing to do with the tree, as far as I'm concerned. There were tons of different tarot systems and cards, I imagine, back then. It wasn't until the Golden Dawn came about in 1888 where they made their own tarot cards. And Arthur Edward Waite and Crowley came out with those first decks that spawned a whole, those cards do correspond with the energies of the tree. And I'm not saying the ones before it don't, but to definitively say that that's the truth, I don't know. But the modern tarot cards, like the decks that we have today, yes, for sure. Like, could she really say that about the Marseille deck? I don't know. Anyways, a most interesting and important aspect of the practical work on the tree concerns the manner in which ceremonial and talismanic magic are used to compensate the findings of the divinatory sciences. Each prick symbol of geomancy, each card of the tarot, and each horoscopic factor have their places assigned to them on the paths on the tree, and the occultist with the necessary knowledge can put together a ritual or design a talisman to compensate or reinforce each or any of these. It is for this reason that divination by the uninitiated is apt to bring bad luck in its train, for it stirs the subtle forces by concentrating the mind upon them, without compensating that which is out of balance by the appropriate magical effort. So according to Dion Fortune, you shouldn't be fucking with any of this stuff if you don't know where it comes from. You're just going to stir up a bunch of bad luck and bullshit. Right. Angels are just negative entities in disguise. They can cloak themselves as angel spirit. Ah, come on, man. Yeah, look, I'll buy that whole thing. Like, you're not going to convince me that we're victims of the Matrix and like we're in this Matrix movie. Like, what I think is you're going to wake up from that dream one day and realize that you've been co-creating this reality all along. And that the only reason why you think angels are that way is because you think they're that way and you're creating them that way. Who the hell? We don't even know if angels are real. This is all speculative. We're void walking here. We're not victims of a Matrix or any of that shit. Although the movie's damn cool. In reality, it does seem to be made up of a Matrix type reality system for sure. But to say it as like factual, like to teach it as like a fact, nah. That's almost as ridiculous as taking all this that I'm reading as solid fact. Even though it is the Dion Fortune. All right. So she's going to go into, that was part 1 of the book. So here's some general considerations. Chapter, whatever the hell this is, part 2, chapter 14. In part, we consider the general scheme and method of using the Kabbalistic tree of life. We now come to the detailed study of the individual Sephirah. Oh, but before I get into this, every time she brings up paths, because they used to confuse the hell out of me because I think the paths are just the paths between the Sephirah. But remember, in the Western occult system is based upon the 32 paths of wisdom, right? The 32 paths of wisdom consist of the 10 Sephirah and the 22 paths together. So anytime she's talking about paths, she's talking about the Sephirah and the paths together for the most part. If she just speaks about it in a broad sense, you know. Let's see. In part, we considered the general scheme and method of using the Kabbalistic tree of life. We now come to the detailed study of the individual Sephirah. Thank God we made it. We may not start it this week, but we made it, right? This study must necessarily be tentative, for a life's research could be given to the significance of the correspondences that spread in endless ramifications from every symbol associated with each Sephirah. But a start must be made. Hence these tentative jottings, for I do not consider the following chapters on the individual Sephirah worthy to be called anything better than this, even though they are the fruit of 10 years of meditation on that marvelous composite symbol. She has a weird way of giving herself credit without giving herself credit, doesn't she? If I studied something for 10 fucking years, I would say, look, what I'm about to tell you is some pretty good knowledge. I'm probably not an expert, but some good knowledge. 10 years is a long time if you really studied something for 10 years. The table of correspondences at the head of each section consists of a selection of the principal systems and ideas associated with each Sephiroth and have no claim whatsoever to comprehensiveness. They contain, however, the more significant symbols and are sufficient to enable the student to gain a sound philosophical grasp of the subject and experiment for himself and the use of the tree as a meditation symbol. The references are taken chiefly from 777. She says by Aleister Crowley, but if she really knew that Crowley took all those correspondences from Mathers, but he got all the credit for it, Liber 777, who got them from, oh wait, I stand corrected. I'm totally wrong. Who got them from MacGregor Mathers and Moynier Mathers, so far as I've been able to trace his references, for he gives no authorities, drew upon the work of Dr. Dee and Sir Edward Kelly, Cornelius Agrippa, Raymond Lully, and Pietro de Albana among the earlier writers. Among the moderns, the same material is found scattered through the works of Nora von Rosenroth, Wynne Westcott, Eliphas Levi, Miss Atwood, Madame Blavatsky, and Anna Kingsford, Mabel Collins, St. Martin, Gerald Massey, J.R.S. Mead, and many others. Damn, she's sticking it to Crowley there. See, Crowley wrote, just so you know what she's talking about, I'm sure a lot of you do, but Crowley wrote this book called Liber 777, and it's a book of nothing but magical correspondences, and it's all based upon the tree, right? It's just catalogs, like this angel corresponds to this energy and this Sephiroth and this planet and this gemstone and this section of angels and intelligences and all this stuff. It's a good textbook for magicians, like a reference book. But he never gives credit to, it's like he wrote all that stuff. But he actually got a ton of that information from both MacGregor Mathers and his wife and a bunch of other people. And he didn't cite his references, which you should do. If you're going to write a book on anything, that's the proper thing to do. To some of these, it is probable he was indebted. Others may have been indebted to him, and some of them are actually members of the Order of the Golden Dawn, which he founded. And he's talking about Mathers, not Crowley. Or she's talking about Mathers. Other sources of information are Fraser's Golden Bough, the works of Wallace Budge, and the writings of Dr. Jung and Freud. The translations of Dr. Jowett from the Greek, the Sacred Books of the E-Series, the Loeb Classical Library, the translation of Plotinus by Stephen McKenna, the translation of the Zohar issued by the Sonsino Press, and the last, but by no means the least valuable source of information, the Holy Bible. So much for occult secrecy. It will be seen that the symbols assigned to each Sephiroth are classified in regular order under certain headings, and to understand the significance attached to these different sections by the occultist and the use he makes of them, it is necessary to explain the method of classification in detail. Number 1, Section 1. The title assigned to each Sephiroth. Its name is given first in Hebrew, then in English, and the Hebrew spelling appended. The accurate spelling of all proper names used in the Kabbalah is vitally important because of the numerical value attached to them by the Kabbalists and the use made of the significance of these numbers by those who work the numerological methods. I am neither a numerologist or a mathematician, and I do not therefore propose to comment on that which lies outside the sphere of my knowledge, but I merely give that data for the convenience of those who can appreciate its significance. So every name of the Sephiroth has a Hebrew name first, and it's got a numerical value, and that's all she's saying about that. Number 2, the magical image and the symbols associated with each Sephiroth. The magical image is the mental picture which the occultist builds up to represent the Sephiroth, and its details yield many significant symbols to meditation. These images are so old and have been built with such a wealth of magical working that they are apt to build themselves up of their own accord during meditation upon the Sephiroth. In the course of my own work on the Kabbalah, I saw most of them long before I had access to the tables that gave the impractical workings or she saw them before she started working with them. In practical workings, the initiated adept builds them detailed symbolism. That don't make English sense. And it is very valuable magical exercise. It is a very valuable magical exercise up to practice the visualization of the magical images in their fullest detail. Much of this detail can be gleaned from the accounts I give of each Sephirah, but readers who have specialized knowledge of the Eastern or classical pantheons and any can elaborate these images to any extent, surrounding them with all the paraphernalia of the gods assigned to each station on the tree, and these can be identified through their astrological associations. Section 3, the situation on the tree, I guess where it resides. This throws an immense amount of light upon any meditation, for it reveals the equilibrium of the spiritual forces working in nature. For instance, Geburah, Mars, and Chesed or Gedula, Jupiter, are opposite of each other upon the tree. The warrior king and the wise man and benign lawgiver of peace balance each other out. So you got the warrior king and the wise benign lawgiver, right? They balance each other out. Geburah, when unbalanced, becomes cruelty and oppression. And Gedula, if you ever hear Gedula, that's the same as Chesed, or the sphere of mercy. That confuses people too, because they don't just have one name for it, right? Chesed. But when you do the ritual, right, Vegebura, right, Vegedula, you're basically is like, that's Geburah and Gedula. That's severity and mercy. Anyways, so Geburah, when unbalanced, becomes cruelty and oppression, and Gedula, when unbalanced, suffers evil to multiply. Unbalanced, so unchecked oppression is evil, and unchecked mercy lets evil run amok. Section 4, the Yetziratic text. This consists of the description of the sphere or path given in the Sefer Yetzirah, or Book of Formations, and the translation I have used is that of Wynne Westcott. And these descriptions are exceedingly cryptic, but they will, from time to time, yield a flash of inspiration and undoubtedly contain the essence of the Kabbalistic philosophy. I got time to finish this. Section 5, the titles, a catalog of the names that have been applied to the particular Sephirah in the rabbinical literature. These throw great light on the subject and are also useful to the student for purposes of reference when tracing out the ideas associated with each Sephirah. Section 6, the names of power assigned to each Sephirah. The God name that represents the most spiritual form of the force and is conceived of as representing the functioning of that force in the kingdom of Atziluth, or the highest of the Folies, the kingdoms of the Kabbalists. 13. The archangelic names that represent the functioning of a force in Bria, the kingdom of the higher mind, and the archetypal ideas. Angelic choirs correspond to the kingdom of or the astral plane, and the mundane chakras are representatives of each force in the kingdom of Asaya, the material plane. So the chakras represent that kingdom in Atziluth, right? Asaya is the fourth world, the material world. Atziluth is the archetypal world. So the God names exist in Atziluth. The chakras exist in Asaya, and they correspond to each other. So one will correspond to each other, or one in there. I hope you get what I'm saying. We'll get there. What I call in my tables the spiritual experience assigned to each Sephirah is called by Crowley the magical power. Whereas this term may be rightly assigned to the 22 paths, it is misleading when applied to the Sephirah. I have changed the term in relation to the Sephirah themselves, but retained it in reference to the paths for reasons which will presently be seen. All right, next, section 7. The virtues and vices that are assigned to each Sephirah of the tree. These indicate the qualities necessary in order to take the initiation of that grade and the form that is taken by any unbalanced force in that sphere, and the highest grade of all, before form is developed, there is no correspondence. Section 8, the correspondence in the microcosm. The microcosm, which is man, that corresponds with the Sephirotic macrocosm, and it's important from many practical standpoints, especially that of spiritual healing and astrology. Section 9, the 4 suits of the tarot pack. So, the 4 suits of the tarot pack, of the tarot cards to the tree, that opens up immense practical importance and forms the philosophical, I guess you could say, system of the divinatory art. The reader keeps these explanations in mind. If he keeps all these things in mind, he'll be able to follow the lines of reasoning and illusion developed, the suicidation of the symbolism assigned to each Sephiroth. There's immense amount of work to be done in the different polytheistic pantheons and of the Christian, Hebrew, and Mohammedan faiths as we relate them to the tree, and this has to be done. Anyways, there's so many typos in this PDF that I have to, it sounds weird when I read it. And she goes on to say, I doubt I could name every single correspondence to every single energy in each thing, but that's okay. All right. So when we pick this back up, we're finally going to go through each Sephiroth. All right, so we'll start with Kether. So she's going to go over the titles, the Hebrew spellings, the magical images that are associated with that sphere, the Yetziratic text, the God names, the archangels, the order of angels, the chakras, the spiritual experience that sphere is supposed to give you, the virtues, the correspondences here in the microcosm, all the symbols, the tarot cards that correspond with that sphere, the colors, and how that sphere exists in each of the 4 worlds. And then she'll have like this beautiful explanation of the energy, which I think is great. So back to your point, unplug the matrix. If there is a spiritual matrix system that was created, I think this would be like the architect. This, to go back to your matrix thing, right? Like this sphere right here would be like the architect of the metaphysical universe. Or that's where it would exist. Anyways, damn, that's brutal. We did like 3 or 4 shows just to get through part 1. But the next part of this book is, in my opinion, the most beautiful and my favorite part of the book. And you'll begin to understand these spheres a lot better when this is over with and what they relate to. Hopefully, at least I did. I hope you enjoy the rest of your 4th of July. I had a great time with you guys tonight. Thanks for spending it with me. I'm going to go wake everybody up and shoot off these firecrackers. And yeah, we'll see you guys next week. I might do something this weekend, depending on how I feel. Please, if you can, support the Fringe FM. And Michael, I'm working on your stickers too. And I'll send you some shots of those babies, and then you can tell me what you think. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, you guys. Love you. Night night. Sweet dreams.
It's been a long, bumpy ride.